And we are live from Frisco, Dallas. Where are we at, Mace?
Frisco,
Texas. Shrine Bowl coverage right here on Orange and Blue today. It is Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason, and we've got to talk about the day that was for Shedeur Sanders, who did not participate in practice, Mace. We've gotten questions already on social networking. I don't think it's a big deal. Najee Harris did something similar. I think it's at the Senior Bowl years ago. It is funny. I don't know if you saw Jim Nagy, who runs the Senior Bowl, tweeted out today about the Notre Dame players and Ohio State players not participating. He said, we don't invite players to not participate. So, maybe some shots fired there or whatever. But either way, scouts have seen this before with a non-quarterback that still went in the first round. So not a big deal for me, or I don't think for scouts, for Shedeur.
it's one of those things where it'll cause some chatter publicly, but in general, nothing to see here. Just like when a player bypasses playing in a bowl game when their team is effectively playing an exhibition game at the end of the season.
Yeah.
That's not a big deal. That doesn't matter. This doesn't matter. And, he'll even tell you, and he mentioned this today, the big thing is meeting with teams. Now, it'll be an interesting discussion as to whether he throws at the combine, whether he throws at his pro day. He said he had not decided on either of those things yet. It is possible he could simply elect to go the individual route, which is to throw 4 teams when they work him out one-on-one, when they have specific visits with him. That's, that would be his prerogative. Does he really gain all that much, you think, if he throws at the combine? I think that's sort of the question.
Right. And do they, try to control the narrative in terms of who he's actually going to throw for? It would be like Deion Sanders tells the story when teams want to interview him at the combine. He said, where are you picking? I think it was the Giants, ironically. Yeah. He said, where are you picking? They're like 10. He goes, I'm going to be gone before then. So maybe it's that sort of situation. But it's Shedeur Sanders. We're going to get something unique and individualized for him, whether that's private workouts for certain teams but not other teams. Just be ready for, Mace, maybe some nonsense out there. I thought Shedeur was very charismatic, talked with great leadership ability today, and that that certain tone that you expect from a franchise QB.
I thought he did as well. It was also interesting. He's trying to kind of balance things here because he obviously has a great deal of respect and love for his father, and not just as his dad, but also respect for Deion Sanders, the Pro Football Hall of Famer, Deion Sanders, the football lifer. As he said today, as Shedeur said, that Deion Sanders' knowledge for him is, quote, like a cheat code, unquote. So he loves that. But at the same time, of course, we learned that Deion Sanders actually FaceTimed Shedeur, like a FaceTime call, during his meeting with the Titans. And, it isn't that Shedeur didn't appreciate it, but he said something that I thought was really interesting. He said today, quote, I told him at the end, hey, it's over with. I got a sore on my own now. I
love that he said that.
I love that. To me, that's kind of the most that's the most telling thing he said. Because it also is sort of the reality that's set in. Of course, now Deion Sanders won't be coaching Dallas Cowboys, and I think a lot of people around here wished that he would get the job, but it's going to be Brian Schottenheimer. So the reality is Shedeur Sanders is going to play for a coach other than his father for the first time since really early in high school.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so what I got from Shedeur today was he's okay with that. He understands this is a natural part of the process of growing up. Sore on my own. I mean, there's so much to that.
Yes.
He's leaving the nest.
Yep. Leaving the nest.
And while he appreciates all that his father has done and will do for him and all the institutional knowledge that he's going to provide him because of his experience with his life in football, he's ready to be his own man. I thought that was a really telling comment. And if I'm a team that's looking quarterback at him and Cam Ward, it's the sort of thing that's encouraging because you don't want him to kind of be too tied to the past and family. he's got to develop his own.
Well, and there's other quarterbacks out there. Kyler Murray springs to mind, where the father had become a problem for the pro team, which does happen in Arizona, or it did happen, I should say. What he said also in that same quote, Macy said, "I think he missed me." And I won't get emotional. And Charlotte, your daughter's not yet old enough to leave the nest, but with my kids having left the nest as a father, like all you want to do is like hold on to what was. So I kind of sympathize with Dion in that. Maybe I wouldn't FaceTime my son when he's in a meeting, but still, like you miss him. You want to see him, make sure he's okay, you know. And Dad, I got this.
There's something pretty profound there, I think, if you're a parent, that you kind of you get.
Yes.
And no, that was cool. But I thought Shedeur kind of nailed it up there. The 12-minute Q&A. He'll have another one coming up at the Combine. Of course, this was sort of a big deal because Shedeur Sanders didn't talk all that often.
Right.
This past year at CU. So it was I think also for all the Buffs, because they all talked here in the last 28,
you
30
talked
hours.
to them all.
Yes, I did. I did. All the Buffs that were out there Friday. And it's actually been reassuring to kind of see that there is an acceptance of the NFL being a different animal. And maybe part of it is that CU is that nest, not just for Shedeur Sanders, but the Deion Sanders CU program is kind of a nest where, you know, they hatch and they feed and they grow. And then when the time comes, time to fly away.
Time to fly.
And that's the sense I got from the Buffs that are here, is like an understanding. It's time to fly.
Right.
Like Shedeur said, you know, got to soar on his own now.
Yep.
Like that's, you know, I wasn't expecting to get hit in the feels in the way I was over all this.
Oh, we definitely got that today. Yeah. And just for the viewing audience, we are going to do like practice reports tomorrow and Monday. We'll have footage from interviews that Mace and myself have gotten while we're here. Again, first day for me, second day for Mace. Yeah. So we've got plenty of that. Practice report available at denversports.com. Plenty of conversation around that. Before we go on and talk and conclude the Shaduer talk, let's set up this clip that we have about Shaduer talking about his involved father, and just kind of see if you get the feels from this clip.
Well, it's not. This was an earlier quote, and he was just sort of asked about, you know, just how involved with his father was and whether it was a problem. And the response was this was a response that I expected, that he was going to basically, you know, stand up for the level of involvement that Deion Sanders has had with Shaduer, not just as a parent, but in the pre-draft process. Here's Shaduer talking about that today.
I ain't know your parents, you know, being involved in wanting the best for you is a problem. Right. I think as parents, each and every one would want the best for their kids. So the fact that he has an opportunity to do that for me, and he has the best quarterback in the country, he's supposed to do that.
Okay.
There's Shaduer talking about Dad being involved, of course, but now set to soar. So we'll see him do that in the NFL, perhaps with the number 1 overall pick, and talking to people kind of in the know. Tennessee's they're very interested. Do not think of this as a smokescreen. This team in the Tennessee Titans is seriously considering Shedeur Sanders, a favorite by some around that team, as the first pick in the draft.
Well, the other thing also in kind of us getting to the bottom of things, that phrase that was uttered earlier this week about a generational talent, that was not what it blew up into on social media. Right. And we see this often with the Broncos. Like, okay, they grabbing that one bite, those 2, 3, 4 words, without the proper context.
Right.
So, you know, you'd hear those 2 words and think, well, Travis Hunter, but it's not that simple for Tennessee. And also, don't forget, with Tennessee, you got a coach in Brian Callahan who comes from out of the Shanahan-McVay school, former Bronco assistant, but of course worked under Zach Taylor, who's a Shanahan-McVay disciple. in Cincinnati before coming down to Tennessee. And one thing that is distinctive about Shaduer is he's got the football mind, the high football IQ, and that's something that Brian Callahan is looking for to run his iteration of the Shanahan-McVay offense. It's kind of like what Sean Payton does. You can't be a dummy running that scheme, and that's more important. What you have up here is more important than all arm talent. Shadeur's arm talent is fine.
More than fine.
More than fine. I mean, it's sort of like the Bo Nix conversation last year. Like, he's got a pro arm. Okay, he doesn't. It's not going to make all the throws that Drake May can make, but can make the throws that you need to make and can operate on time, on schedule. The big thing I think the Titans are going to have to figure out. I don't think it's a question of character. I don't think it's a question of personality, being too big for the locker room, anything like that. I think the question the Titans are going to have to answer is this: can they cure him of some of the bad habits that set in, particularly in 2023 when CU's offensive line was a sieve and he was trying to buy time? If they feel they can do that, then Shedeur might be the right guy for that number one.
As someone very close to the team told us, Brian Callahan covets the skills that Shedeur Sanders has. So we'll see as this draft process continues. We're going to see Cam Ward in a couple of days in Mobile, so that'll be another part of the conversation. Now,
but it's nice to not talk about this with the Broncos. This is somebody else's problem,
right?
But it's interesting. We talk about Shedeur, of course, because he's always going to have Colorado ties.
Of course,
that's another thing that I got from talking to these Buffs here is how much the state of Colorado, the place of Colorado, came to mean to these guys who weren't from Colorado. I mean, one and all, if they got the chance to be Broncos, they'd be thrilled. They would be thrilled to stay in our state. So that's something really cool to see how, an unfamiliar place, unfamiliar climate. I mean, some of these guys hadn't seen much, if any, snow before, and how they really embraced being a part of the Colorado scene. So, we won't be talking about with Shedeur Sanders, but maybe, with the safeties, maybe with Jonte Webster and the receivers. Maybe we'll talk about a Buff or two being aboard the Broncos.
Well, you mentioned him being thrilled to be Broncos. I would be thrilled if that was LaJonte Webster.
Ooh.
Because he was amazing today and a slot king.
Play the catch.
Let me see.
Do we have it in there?
I don't think we have it in there yet.
Okay.
That's coming up for tomorrow's show. We do have
Darn,
Lachey and Chandler Martin.
Put that in there. My bad.
In there as well. But either way, full, breakdown, film breakdown and stuff. So we can do Luke Lachey or Chandler Martin today, Mace, or we can go to our more newsy topics, including a Broncos front office member that's.
We've got to get to the news of the day, I think, here.
Okay. All right.
I mean, just because it's a meaningful loss, low key. Darren Muji going on to the New York Jets? He got the head coach, he got the general manager's job with the Jets announced today. He's working with Aaron Glenn, and I think of this as sort of the culmination of a lot of deposits and connections that Darren Muji has made going back to when he first joined the Broncos as a scouting intern back in 2012. He's going to work with Aaron Glenn. He's never worked with Aaron Glenn before, although he did interview him in the Nathaniel Hackett hiring cycle. But Aaron Glenn's also a Sean Payton guy, having played for Sean Payton, coached with Sean Payton, which is what led him to follow Dan Campbell, another Payton acolyte, to Detroit. And so here you have Darren Muji, who has survived through the John Elway era. Elway moves on. He doesn't just stay. He moves up under George Payton.
Yep.
And then with all the questions over, what's going to happen on the personnel side and all that, kept moving up.
Mm-hmm.
So impresses basically everyone who's been around him, including Sean Payton, I think. And that's my voice kind of cracks a little bit. And I think that's part of the reason you're talking about Muj getting this job with the Jets, is because he's in the Sean Payton orbit now.
Right. And personally, Mace, you and I've known him since he showed up in Denver.
No.
I love when good people that work hard get advancement.
Mhm.
You know, not everything's fair in life, but when you see someone like Darren Muji, who is a hard worker, and people have asked me, I've gotten a ton of questions
He's
about
a
him.
grinder.
I said he's genuine.
Yeah.
That's the main word I kept using. He's like, tell me about Darren Muji. I said he's genuine.
Yeah.
He is that guy. He's going to work hard for you. And the Jets, it's a complicated situation, so I'm rooting for Darren to have some success, unless they play the Broncos.
I hope he's ready for some of the things that can be issues with the Jets that aren't issues
He
with the
was
Broncos.
probably warned about some of those issues, so
Like,
we'll see.
that's an unusual situation from the top down, and let's just say historically it has not been as functional from the top down as the Broncos are right now. Of course, really, the Broncos had sort of the opposite problem for a few years there after Muji came in. Of course, that was when Pat Bowlen stepped away as he had to deal with Alzheimer's disease that took his life. And you had the absence of the figure at the top. With the Jets, you've got people at the top who don't know what they don't know, and I think try to exert too much influence and maybe take some of the wrong pieces of advice. Woody Johnson and his son would be best served by listening to Darren Muji, listening to Aaron Glenn.
Right.
I think the two of them are going to find a common ground pretty quickly as they try to rebuild the Jets. Of course, not an easy situation at all. You're in the AFC East. You've got Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills sitting there atop the division. You've got Drake May rising with New England, Mike Vrabel coming in as head coach. So you don't think the Patriots are going to stay down for long, and the Patriots have oodles of cap room. They could be that team that rockets back up the standings this year.
Yeah, and you don't have a quarterback with the Jets.
The Jets
keep Aaron Rodgers.
I hope they're going to give Darren Muji time because
it's going to take time.
That's a mess. Mm-hmm. And it probably is another, and maybe this is part of, with Aaron Glenn, they know what they're getting. Aaron Glenn was part of a teardown in Detroit.
Right.
Teardown to build back up. That's probably what this year needs to be with the Jets, and I hope for the sake of Darren Muji and Aaron Glenn that ownership is patient with that.
Right. And with the Broncos, Cody Rager then potentially moves up the chain of command.
Yeah.
As he came over last year from New Orleans, a very trusted, assistant with Mickey Loomis, who's Sean Payton's guy. So it definitely stings to lose a guy like Darren Muji in your front office. But you wish him well. And
Broncos are going to be okay.
Yeah, Cody Rager will just step up in some sort of role, an advanced role, and keep this train rolling, man. That's what you got to do.
That's what you're hoping. And how often do you hear it's a good problem to have when your lieutenants are being plucked for greater roles?
Yeah, it's what you want.
Yes. I do wonder, to kind of talk about people being plucked here. We saw Joe Brady has pulled himself out of consideration for the Saints head coaching job.
Yeah.
And that's another team that probably needs a pretty clear reset. They haven't had any formal interest in Vance Joseph, but does that change? Do they reset a little bit right now? Because it seems like it's Mike McCarthy, or they just kind of start the process over again.
Right.
In New Orleans.
Yeah. So if McCarthy hems and haws, maybe they take a look at VJ. But as of right now, it seems like the staff is intact. Mm-hmm. You lose Darren Muji, front office changes a little bit, but you roll on with the coaches that you've got.
Well, it'll be interesting now because there were rumblings connecting Chris Banjo, assistant special teams, to Aaron Glenn's staff as well. Declan Doyle, tight ends coach, who is going to be interviewing with the Chicago Bears for their offensive coordinator position. It's a non-play calling position, but it's still a step up for Doyle if he were to get that job. So it's a good problem to have, but we already know the staff's going to look different on special teams. I still expect it's going to be Darren Rizzi in the end getting the special teams.
He's getting quite a bit of interest, though, not just from the Broncos. So
as he should.
You got some competition.
An excellent special teams coach.
Right.
That being said, the Broncos, they're not going to be outbid.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah. So if they want Darren Rizzi, they can write an appropriate check to make sure he is. If it takes making him the highest paid special teams coach in the league, so be it.
Yeah, that's what they'll do. And now in the AFC West, as we wrap up tonight's show here live in Frisco, Texas, Pete Carroll? Pete Carroll is back in the NFL as the Las Vegas Raiders head coach. Mace, this is what makes the AFC West a hell of a division for head coaches with Super Bowl rings.
Jim Harbaugh is the only one who doesn't have a Super Bowl ring, and he's got a national championship ring, and he's been to a Super Bowl. So it's the first time you have a division that has 4 coaches, all of whom have been head coaches for Super Bowl teams. That's pretty incredible. And, ranking them 1 to 4 is difficult. I mean, you could be the 4th best coach in the AFC West and one of the 7 best coaches in the NFL. That's how deep that pool is.
That's crazy.
And the other thing is also Pete Carroll turning 74 this year, signing on for a job that probably has some rebuild to it. Mm-hmm. The Raiders aren't all the way there now. I think his first job is making sure that Max Crosby wants to be around. Now, Crosby's has not given an indication that he wants to leave Las Vegas, but the frustration, understandably, has accumulated for him.
Right.
I think the first task is kind of making sure he's on board. So it's very similar to when John Fox came to Denver, and one of the first things he did was get Champ Bailey an extension.
Right.
Kind of say, okay, who do I got to keep? You've been through some crap here, but can you go through a little bit more until we get to the other side of this? So that's something to watch. And then obviously the quarterback position. I tweeted on Friday. Pete Carroll, who reportedly has mended some fences with Russell Wilson. That's reportedly. That's also, I'm sure, a little agent-fed conversation.
Oh, I believe so, especially because the Steelers, according to Russell Wilson himself on McAfee's show, said, we've opened negotiations for a contract with the Steelers. What's a great way to drive up that price, Mace?
Get another team involved.
Somebody else is interested.
Yep. And so, create at least the illusion of interest from the Raiders. I mean, it would be the funniest thing.
I would love the drama.
It would be the funniest thing if Russell Wilson were the Raiders quarterback. Broncos country over, I think, for the most part, isn't a fan of Russ. It would make it very easy. It would bring – I'm all for storylines, and Russell Wilson being a Raider would be an amazing storyline for the history of Broncos-Raiders, the rivalry that goes back to the 1960s. I'd be for that, and I would say don't be afraid of Russell Wilson as a Raider because you have a better quarterback for what you're trying to do in Denver and Bo Nix.
Right. You have the better quarterback, and, well, I think you got the better coach. But either way, that's a great debate.
And it's not that Pete Carroll is a bad coach.
What does he have left? You know what I mean? What does he have left? He's got youthful energy at 73, I believe he is. But it's a question when coaches lose their fastball, and they all do at some point. We've seen it through NFL history as various coaches have, tried different spots. Pete Carroll, everything's a competition. But unless you get a quarterback, and not Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers or Sam Darnold, I've heard suggested for the Raiders.
If you want to microwave it, your best chance is Sam Darnold. But here's the thing, then you got to make sure you're running a Shanahan-McVay offense because one thing with Sam Darnold that I think we've learned is that he can run a specific system very well.
Yes.
Which, as long as there are Shanahan-McVay acolytes around football, is going to keep him gainfully employed for a while. So the Raiders may make sense, but for their sake, I would want it to come with the right coach and the right scheme. Of course, if you're from the Broncos perspective, you're like, oh, okay, go ahead and get it wrong. But think about this. In the AFC West, look, Andy Reid has got the lifetime pass in Kansas City.
Right.
Jim Harbaugh, Pete Carroll, Sean Payton. Somebody's going to fail in those three. Both, all three coming into teams that were in various stages of rebuild. Probably less so with the Chargers, but they were coming off a really bad year. So, a very accomplished coach is going to fall flat on his face and finish last next year. And that would put that coach probably on a seat that's at least a little bit warm.
Mm-hmm.
It's about going into 2026.
Right.
It's a rough game. I mean, I'd say the only one, maybe, and I say a little bit. I'd say if the Raiders are in last place and they look promising, Pete Carroll's seat won't be warm. Maybe that's the one possibility that wouldn't happen. But if the Raiders are 4-13 and they don't get out of this muck, then yeah, the seat will be a little bit warm. Just like for Sean Payton, if he'd gone 4-13 in one of the last two seasons, his seat would have warmed up. So
yeah, well, and Andy Reid's probably not going anywhere.
Why would
Whatever
he?
happens to the Chiefs, like he seems to be one of those guys that, as you mentioned, lifetime contract. So if you just take this thing in like the next 4 years, in the next 4 years, is Pete Carroll still head coach of the Raiders? I don't know. They don't have a quarterback yet. You would imagine it would be with Sean Payton. You would imagine it would be with Jim Harbaugh. And Andy Reid, yes, of course. So this division, toughest in football.
He has the quarterback, and last week he got his 300th win, which would put him probably 4 years away from reaching Don Shula's record of 347 wins. That's very attainable for Andy Reid. I don't see a reason why he's going anywhere. The other thing is he has no hobbies, doesn't golf. No, he's a football guy through and through.
Yep, 1,000%. How much does it mean to him, though? Like, I think Belichick kind of wanted that.
Oh, I think it means something to him.
I think it should.
I think it does as it becomes a realistic possibility, because he may not match Bill Belichick in Super Bowls, because he's only halfway there, and he's certainly living on more than a prayer. But yeah, couldn't help myself there.
Yeah, you never can.
Yeah, it was just on the tee. I had to swing. But when you see it being realistic, then I think it changes your perspective, where you say, okay, I think I can go for this. And he's still, the Chiefs have won 16 of 18 games this year. Obviously he still knows what he's doing, although the challenges will probably start to increase here very shortly, I suspect.
Yep.
Because the thing that the Chiefs are going to have to do gradually is they will have to, I'm not going to say rebuild, but they're in an imperial phase right now. They'll probably fade back a little bit, not be quite as dominant, because they're going to have to, you're seeing Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, supplemental parts getting earned.
Right.
That they're going to have to adequately replace.
It happens. It happens. I know the chat room was asking, like, why are you guys talking about Shedeur Sanders? Because he might be in the AFC West.
Yeah.
We'll continue to dig around, but as of right now, if Tennessee's showing that interest in Shedeur Sanders, it's either legit or it's so that the Giants trade up or that the Raiders trade up from 3-1 or 6-1.
Yeah.
And Pete Carroll with Shedeur Sanders, a pure pocket passer, that's dangerous.
Yes.
It's dangerous for Denver.
Imagine, Pete Carroll never had an ideal pro-style quarterback when he had Russell Wilson.
Right.
Someone who, Russell Wilson can do a lot of the things, but he wasn't, a pure drop back pocket.
And they had to figure it out with Russ.
They figured it out. And here's the one thing about Pete Carroll that I think does make the Raiders intriguing. Pete's always been a problem solver.
Yes.
Look at how the fact that the Seahawks, they trade Russell Wilson, everybody writes them off. Geno Smith is kind of thought of as a career backup, and they go to the playoffs, and Geno has a great year for him. So Pete Carroll still has his chops, believe me. But I think he may be intrigued by the notion of starting off with a young quarterback who suits what he feels a quarterback needs to be able to do to win, like his ideal. Not I'm going to massage this for what I have and maximize what I have. If I have a chance to get a guy who has these skill sets from the beginning, I'll take that chance. That's why the Raiders, if number one is open for bidding, the Raiders, I think, are definitely going to be picking up the phone.
You know what I'm intrigued by? The menu that you opened up for the place we're going to go eat.
Oh, yeah.
We haven't eaten dinner yet.
We're
Don't
hungry.
feel sorry for us. But what's the name of this place?
It is La Hacienda Ranch.
La Hacienda Ranch.
Mexican cuisine, mesquite grilled steaks.
Okay. If you happen to be watching in Frisco, come by and say hi. But we are going to go get something to eat. And
a little hungry.
Yeah, a little hungry. I did have a snack. I have to eat on time because I'm a baby. But I'm fine. I'm not hangry yet.
You have good habits. I just kind of eat whenever. So
it's a go time.
My habits aren't great.
And we are going to the Shrine Bowl, to the Senior Bowl, and right to you right here on YouTube. So Mace, as we scream at the top of our lungs,
yes,
love being on site. How can folks help us out on YouTube?
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell.
Ding! So that you
never
miss a vid. Let's go eat. He's Mace. I'm Cecil. Stay tuned. Stay frosty.